Hello, my friends. Leo Babauta from Zen Habits here, and I'm so excited to be here with you. Really love making these videos for all of you, and I love the comments that I've been getting. In this video, I am going to talk about getting started with running. If that is something that you're interested in, maybe it's something you've always wanted to do, or maybe you've tried and you've been struggling, or maybe you're starting right now. It's like one of your goals for this year. Awesome. I am here for you. So we're going to talk about basically the best practices for starting running. If you're an experienced runner, you've been running, races and marathons and all that kind of stuff, you're probably not going to get too much out of this, but watch anyway if you want to. Maybe you can share in the comments some of the things that really help you. Actually, leaving a comment is incredibly helpful for me. So what I really love for you to do by the end of this video, or when you're done watching, is leave a comment and let me know, do you have other tips that actually help you that you would share with others? Do you have questions or struggles that you'd like me to address? And do you have topics for future videos you'd like to see me record? They really matter to me, so please leave a comment. I eventually will reply to every single one, even if it's with like a heart emoji or something like that. I read every single comment and I reply. Okay, so let's get started. How to start running. Now, the first thing I'm going to note, and this might be a little bit obvious to you, but I'm going to assume that you are healthy enough to be running. You don't have some, underlying medical condition. You don't have like an injury or a disability that's going to stop you from running. It's not going to be bad for your health to be running. And that's the case for most people. But if you have a chronic illness or chronic injury, I would definitely encourage you to get checked out by a doctor and get their approval to get started with running. Now, maybe you don't have, you're not aware of a chronic injury, but you're in a little bit of a higher risk group. I would still get checked out. So these are people who are maybe getting up there in age. So, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, that's not, a problem. Like many people run in those ages, but if you haven't been physically active, and you're going to get started, please get checked out. Other people, people who have asthma, that's obviously a known condition for you, but maybe you don't know if you have asthma, but you've been wheezing. People who have weight, the extra weight that they've put on. There isn't a problem with running and we'll talk about weight. But if you're overweight, I would definitely get checked out. And then any other kinds of like injuries that you've had, any other kinds of like weird symptoms that make you think maybe this could be a concern, get checked out. So, if you're 20 years old and you're like, of normal weight and you've never had any kind of health symptoms or injuries or anything like that, maybe you don't need to be checked out by a doctor. But for a lot of people who are have like at least a slight risk, I would say get checked out. Okay, let's assume you've done that. And we are talking about people who are not going to hurt themselves, not going to like injure themselves or make their conditions worse. The next thing I want to talk about is if you are overweight. Now, I have no judgment. I started running when I was overweight, and a lot of people run with extra weight. There is actually no problem with running if you're overweight, but it does come with some extra concerns that you want to make sure you're aware of so that you address it correctly. And so being overweight does come with some extra weight, obviously, that you're putting on your joints, your tendons, your knees, your feet joints, all of, your ankles and your heel, all of these kinds of joints. We're putting some extra weight on it, and that's okay, but that can increase your risk of injury. And so one of the main way that we get injury from running is by increasing our running faster than our body can handle. And our body can handle a lot of things. The heart is one, the lungs are another, the muscles are another. But the one that often will get overstressed from increasing too quickly is the tendons and ligaments. in our joints, for example. So heel injuries are very common, Achilles tendon, knee injuries. And so these things, what we want to do is to avoid injury is to build up very slowly, build up how much we're stressing these joints very slowly. And what happens is if we can do that slowly enough, we not only do we not get injured, but they get stronger so that we can add more stress over time. So there's a idea of progressive overload. And so if you have some extra weight, that's okay. I just want you to build up more slowly than someone who is, let's say, thin and doesn't have extra weight. That doesn't mean you're anything wrong with you. It just means that you want to like make sure you're being a little bit more careful. Because someone who is thin doesn't have that extra stuff. Now they should still build up slowly, but maybe not as slowly. So I still, no matter what your weight is, no matter what your condition is, I encourage you to build up slowly over the course of weeks and months so that you don't injure yourself, no matter what it is. But add a little bit of extra time if you have that extra weight. And so if you're overweight, there's the first phase that I'm going to talk about. I would encourage you to make that longer. Add an extra 4 weeks to 8 weeks to this first phase. The first phase is walking. So if you are, let's say of thin weight, let's say you're thin, and you start walking, I would encourage, assuming you're not already super active, I would encourage you to do this first phase of just walking, even though you're not overweight. Just walk for a couple of weeks. And what I encourage you to do is to walk anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. And maybe at first it's just, 15, 20 minutes, but then build up over the course of a couple of weeks to 30 to 45 minute walks, 3 to 5 times a week. If you can stand to do 30 minutes 5 times a week, great. If that feels like a little bit too much for your schedule or your body, 3 times is totally fine. So we're walking at first. Now you might say, like, Leo, you said this is going to be a guide to running. Well, if you haven't already been walking a lot, if you're not already super physically active, then a first phase of walking really helps. And again, 2 weeks is the minimum. I actually think for a lot of people, 6 weeks to 10 weeks is actually a really good idea. Now, in this phase, we're building up slowly the amount of time that we're doing it. And then once we get to that, let's say we're able to do 30 to 45 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week, we can actually increase the speed. So we're walking first just, at a easy pace. Then we might just start picking it up, not super fast where we're feeling like, like really fast heartbeats or really heavy breathing. We don't want to be heavy breathing. So faster speed, but not super fast. You don't have to be power walking. This is not race walking. This is just picking up the speed a bit. And again, if you have that extra weight, do 6 to 10 weeks of this first phase of walking so that you can build up. And as you do so, I think you might be losing a little bit of weight as you're adding in this extra walking. If you've already been walking a lot, you can skip this first phase. Okay? But for most people who've been a little bit inactive or sedentary for a while, don't skip this first phase. It's really important. What happens in this first phase is not only are you building a habit. You're actually building a habit to get out there and start moving. You're learning to block off that time and remember to do it. And maybe you hold yourself accountable. Maybe you get a walking partner. Maybe you find things to do other than, maybe you have a partner, maybe not. Maybe you listen to podcasts or find audiobooks or good music or enjoy nature. Whatever it is, you're learning to get out there. But the other thing that you're doing is you are also learning, you're training your body to actually deal with the stress of moving outdoors. And you can do this on a treadmill, by the way, but I actually love outdoors. So I recommend outdoors if it's possible for some people because of the weather or their environment or just whatever convenience. Treadmill is totally fine. But let's say you're outside, you're getting used to it, but you're also getting your heart used to moving. You're getting your lungs used to moving, your muscles, and again, very importantly, your tendons. Tendon injury is the biggest one when it comes to running. So this first phase is really important because you're starting to add stress to your tendons to your muscles, to your heart, to your lungs, and it's actually going to be really preparing your body for running. So don't skip this first phase. Now, if you are overweight, one of the things you can do in this first phase of 6 to 10 weeks is start to eat a little bit healthier. Just make some small changes. So, for example, maybe you start to eat less sugar. And definitely, if you've been drinking sugar, like sodas and sweet teas and stuff like that, cut that out as much as possible. Don't drink all of those sweet coffee drinks. You go to Starbucks and get the iced, venti, whatever. Stop drinking that. If you cut out sweet drinks, and if you've been drinking multiple sweet drinks a day, you will start to lose some weight. If that's not so much a problem, cut out other sweets, pastries and desserts and candy and all of that kind of stuff. So that would be my first priority in terms of your eating. But let's say that's really easy, and after a couple of weeks, you're like, I'm barely eating any sweets. Great. I'm not saying zero. I'm saying cut it down to a minimum. Fried foods would be my next one. Eat less fried foods. Next is, processed carbs like breads and pastas and obviously sweets. What other things do people eat? Bagels, pastries, those kinds of things. Eventually, I would also cut back on the amount of like really fatty red meat and definitely processed meat, cut back on those as well. I'm vegan, but you don't have to be vegan or vegetarian to lose weight or eat healthy. You can eat, fish and poultry with a little bit of red meat here and there. I'm not saying don't eat any red meat, but cut back on the fattier, the fried foods would be another big area. So if you're doing all of these things, cutting back on these things, and then as you do so, add in some really healthy whole plant foods, for example, fruits and vegetables. You don't need to overdo the sweet fruits and the dried fruits. We want to not overdo those either because those are basically just like sweet treats. But if you're eating apples, if you're eating, some carrots and some greens, you're adding those in while removing sweets and fried foods and, some fatty red meats. Some processed carbs. If you start to remove some of those and replace them with fruits and vegetables, some beans, some nuts and seeds, you are going to be eating healthier and doing really good for your body, giving your body the fuel it needs for all of this. And you'll probably be losing some weight if you had some extra weight. So pretty simple changes to the diet. Make them one change at a time over the course of weeks. Okay, phase 2. Let's imagine you've been walking for 2 weeks if you're, of normal weight, or 6 to 10 weeks if you're overweight. And then find the, if you're in between, find the range. For most people, I say 4 to 8 weeks is a good amount. Phase 2 is still doing the same amount of walking. So we want to build up in phase 2, if you're not there yet, at 30 minutes 5 times a week, 30 to 45 minutes 5 times a week. Maybe even an hour. If you're like, this is easy, I'm going up to an hour, great. Go to an hour of walking 4 or 5 times a week. You can do an hour 3 times a week, and then the other 2 days do 30 minutes. So we can mix it up. But we want to be increasing the walking. And I also then encourage you, once you've done that, once you've gotten to that level, start to add in a little bit of running. When I say a little bit, I mean 10 to 20 seconds of running, sprinkled a few times in this walk. So, first time I add in running, I'm just going a super light jog, not fast at all, just a little bit of a light jog, and I'm doing it for 10 to 20 seconds. And I'm doing that like 3 times in my 30 to 60 minute walk. So it's very easy. We want to do sub-maximal training here. So easy, easy, easy. Do that for a few times, and then maybe add in a fourth. And do that for a few times, and then add in a fifth. And eventually, if you start to add in a little, 10, 20 seconds of jogging, slowly, every 3 days, add an extra one. So we did 3 times, 3 days in a row. Now it's 4 times, 3 days in a row. Now it's 5 times, 3 days in a row. Eventually, you're going to be running, um, you know, 10 times in the course of your 30 to 60 minute walk. And what I want you to do is do about a minute or two of rest in between those runs. So we run for 10 to 20 seconds, well, warm up for 10 minutes of walking, then run for 10 to 20 seconds, then rest or walk for a minute or two, and then another 10 to 20 seconds of light running, and then walk for a minute or two. And when you're done with your reps, so let's say you did 3 reps of running, just walk for the rest of the time. Through this, you will be slowly starting to prepare your body for phase 3. Once you get to about 10 intervals of running, 10 running intervals, so 10 to 20 seconds of running, and you do 10 of them with a minute or two of walking in between. And again, you shouldn't be doing this where it feels like you're like super heavy breathing, super flushed and super sweaty. Like this should not feel super hard to you. So only do, when I say 10 to 20 seconds, if 20 seconds feels hard, do 10 seconds. And if you need 2 minutes of rest so that this doesn't feel super hard, do 2 minutes of rest. If you need 3 minutes, do 3 minutes. I don't care. But we want to build up to about 10 reps, 10 intervals throughout the walk. And then we move to phase 3. Phase 3 is we start to gradually lengthen the run while shortening the walk. So again, 10-minute warm-up. Now I'm doing 30 seconds of running, 10 intervals of that with some, a minute or two of walking in between. Eventually I can do 40 seconds with a minute. And maybe now I'm running a minute and walking a minute. A minute running, walk a minute. And so I'm doing about 50-50 at this point. Eventually you can lower the walking down to 30 seconds with a minute of running. Minute of running, 30 seconds of walking. And so that is phase 3, is we are increasing the length of our running intervals and slowly, slowly, slowly decreasing the walking intervals. Now we want this to be sub-maximal. So we always want to be doing it at an easy pace, never go hard, and we should feel like we have more in the tank. We could do more of these. So don't push yourself. We want to push it a little bit into your discomfort slightly, but never so hard that it feels really, really hard. There's some reasons for that. One of them is psychological. If we empty the tank, it feels so hard. We're going to dread doing it eventually. It becomes really hard. The second is if we actually get a better training effect if we do submaximal. Again, 5 days a week. Now you can, if this feels too much, you can do 3 days a week of this running with the running intervals and 2 days of just walking. And I think that's actually maybe ideal for a lot of people. If you're in pretty decent shape, you can add in a 4th or 5th day of running, but don't be in a hurry to do that. Okay, phase 4 is basically just running for a short amount of time. Again, 10-minute warm-up. Maybe it's 10 to 20-minute running. Maybe start with 10 minutes and then 20. And you're running not continuously, but mostly continuously. So now we're running for a minute and a half with a 20-second walk break. Another minute and a half, 20 to 30-second walk break. And we're doing like mostly continuously, and we slowly drop the walking break so that it goes down to like 10 seconds. And once you can do that for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, now 20 minutes, and we slowly build that up to 30 minutes with some walking breaks in there, 10 to 20-second walking breaks. And so now we're actually running. Now these are not walks with some runs thrown in. This is runs with a few walks thrown in. I actually don't think you ever need to get rid of the walks. A lot of times people mistakenly believe I don't need to run continuously for it to actually be running. I want you to drop that out of your mindset. Walk breaks are a good thing. People do walk breaks in marathons. Lots of people do. Running experts actually recommend it. I do it. People do pretty much every ultra marathoner that I've ever known does walk breaks. Ultra marathoners are people who will run, you know, 50 miles or more, 50K or more. By the way, in my background, I've run 3 marathons in this is a while ago, and then I ran an ultra marathon. I think that was in 2014 or so. So it was a 50 miler up in the hills of the Marin Headlands, north of San Francisco. I've run a bunch of different races. I've run a lot. I've had quite a running journey. I'm not an expert. I'm not a good competitive runner. I'm a decent runner who just enjoys the sport. Should have clarified that at the beginning. But yeah, that's that would be my 4 phase running program. If you can run for 30 minutes, you could probably do a 5K. So sign up for a race. Don't race it like you need to run really fast, but just do it for fun because there's other people doing it and it's fun to sign up for these races and do them with others. Other things to do for fun with running, I highly recommend finding a running partner or a running group. There's a lot of times there's a running group near you that can be super fun to do. Now, you might wait until you're at phase 4 to join a running group, but you can do all of these phases with a running partner, a walking and then a running partner, if they're willing to go through these phases. And finally, find ways to make the running enjoyable. Don't make it this thing that you like have to do and you're forcing yourself to do and suffering through. I like listening to audiobooks or podcasts. I like just being out in nature and moving my body, but audiobooks and podcasts can be a nice way to make these, fun, enjoyable experience. I also will listen to albums or playlists from my kids. My kids will make me a playlist and I'll listen to their music. Or listen to like an album from like Bruce Springsteen or like Bob Dylan or some Chapel Roan or something like that. So enjoy the runs. In terms of running equipment, you don't need a lot. I do recommend a pair of decent running shoes, but it doesn't have to be expensive. The best running shoes are definitely, over 100 or close to $200. You don't need to get those to start out. You can get something in the $40 to $60 range that's going to serve you for a little while. Go to a running store if they have one nearby and tell them you like a beginner's running shoe fit for you, and but the one that won't break the bank, and they'll help you out there. Um, I there's a lot of different philosophies for running shoes. I'm not going to recommend anything, but get some, that probably the main thing that you want to get is a decent pair of running shoes. You don't need a lot of technology to get started. I actually do have a couple of pieces of technology that I use. One is a running watch. The best running watches are by Garmin, but Apple watches are good, and I have one called Coros, the Coros Pace 3. It's a budget running watch that does almost everything that Garmin does. It has the heart rate monitor on it and a lot pace and a bunch of other really cool things. Um, your route, a bunch of cool things. So if you want, to spend some money, a Garmin is definitely the thing to get. Apple Watch is also super good. Polar is also well respected. And then, I actually think a Coros Pace 3 is actually totally acceptable. It's lightweight and waterproof and, a good piece of kit. Beyond running watches, which you do not need to get at all, you don't need any kind of tech. Um, you know, Decent pair of earbuds to listen to your music or podcasts or audiobooks is kind of cool. You don't need that either. Some running clothes that aren't cotton are good. Some people, I like, just the general like polyester running clothes. You don't need to get expensive ones. You can go to your box store and get some cheap running clothes. Some people like merino wool. I don't, but whatever wicks sweat away and is made for running. But you can get away with whatever you have to start with. You don't need to break the budget. Um, If you want to get into running beyond the scope of this video, I recommend a thing called 80-20 Running by Matt Fitzgerald. It's a book. I also listen to it as an audiobook. He talks about low heart rate training as the main uh, uh, way of training, with a little bit of higher paced intervals built in there. But for the most part, just really easy running. For that, you will need either a heart monitor and train in zone 2. You can look that up and how to calculate it based on your maximum heart rate. So zone 2 is, with a heart rate monitor, you can actually find what your heart rate is and stay within a certain zone. But you actually don't need a heart rate monitor or a watch or anything like that. You can just monitor your breath. And so zone 2 basically means easy paced running. And so you should be running. You might mix in some walking with it, but your breathing should not be so heavy that it's hard for you to talk. It should be so that if you were on the phone with someone, they would know you're exercising, because you have a little bit of a heavier breath, but you could still have a conversation with them pretty easily. So that's, you don't actually have to get on the phone with someone. You can just be like, try and talk. And yeah, there's a little bit of a breathiness to my talking, but I can talk without doing that, right? And so again, you don't need a lot of technology to run. And this is a way, the zone 2 training is a way to stay at an easy pace without overdoing it. And by doing that, you will be training yourself to run at a pace that isn't going to overdo it for you, that is going to allow you to run longer and further without injury, without risking anything too bad to your health, and actually going to build up some long-term longevity and health benefits that are really amazing. So I highly recommend, beyond the scope of this video, beyond phase 4, 80-20 running. Most of your miles should be in zone 2. Build up very, very slowly, stay injury-free, have fun, and enjoy the habit of running. Thanks, my friends. I will talk to you later. Like this video if it helped. Leave a comment on what questions you might have or anything else, and subscribe to this channel if you want to get more of these videos and more Zen habits in your life. Thanks, friends. Talk to you later.